All right, very good evening to one and all. And as promised, we are back with some InfyTQ questions. Before I start, I'll just check whether the sound is working. So if you can hear us, you can see me, please just reply on the chat that you can see me and you can hear us, and I'll go forward then. So please do reply on the chat if you can see me and you can hear me. If you can, then we'll get started. So, all right, I'm assuming that the audio and everything is correct. Great. Thank you so much everybody for joining today. We are going to discuss about the InfyTQ latest concepts that, as per my feedback from the students, I've got feedback from different students about what kind of questions have come. A lot of it is similar to what I discussed in the previous webinar. Some of them are new concepts. So I'll be discussing them today. So just stay tuned. This will be not as long as the previous webinar, but we'll do at least, let's say, probably around 40-50 minutes if time permits. That's how long the webinar is going to be. Before I start, as always, if you want to get a notification about this particular webinar series, because we'll keep doing as we get more and more concepts from InfyTQ, please click the subscribe button so that you will get the notification whenever we are doing a similar webinar the next time. So please do click the subscribe button, and also please click the like button right now, because if you like this video, other students who are also searching for InfyTQ will come to know about this webinar as it is. So please, I request you to hit the like button so that all other students can also come to know about this video. Great. So right now what we're going to do is I've gone through some of the questions that have come on InfyTQ as per the students' feedback, and I'll be sharing some of the major concepts where students had a doubt in. I've noticed what all you said on the chat. Today we're discussing mainly Python MCQs because Python had some of the most confusing topics as per my feedback. SQL was more or less the same things. One or two questions, like one question was from MongoDB or another question was from somewhere else. That's fine. I mean, you can manage that, but there was some new Python concepts that many people were not able to grasp. I'm going to be concentrating on those things. So very specifically, these are the topics that I'm going to be focusing on, which are exception handling. I saw some tricky questions in exception handling, so I'll be covering those questions. I'll be covering the data structures questions. A lot of you have also told me that linked list, stacks and queues questions were asked. I'll be covering some OOP questions specifically related to abstract methods and abstract classes and what exactly happens in them. And I will not be covering hashing. I saw a hashing question, but I will not be covering hashing. If you want to understand about hashing, please go to the previous webinar. The link is already there in the description. So if you just scroll down to the description, you'll get the link of the previous webinar. Please go down to the previous webinar. You'll get that link. If you want to know about hashing and if you want to know about the format of InfyTQ, what are the kind of different rounds of InfyTQ, all of that has been covered in the previous webinar, for which the link is already mentioned below in the comments and the description section. All right. As always, some of our mentors are online to answer any doubts you have. In case your doubts are not answered, I will be checking the chat after the session is over. So please keep putting up your doubts on the chat. I'll be answering those doubts as soon as this session is at the end of the session, not after the session, but at the end of the session, when I'm done with explaining all of the slides, I will be going to the questions that are mentioned in the chat. All right. So I hope everybody got that. Again, just one last time, do subscribe to the subscribe to the channel and like the video so that more students get to hear about this. Okay. So let's get started right away. I picked up one of a possible question that came, and this was like an example of a question that came, and this was related to exception handling. And the trick in exception handling, everybody knows about the try, except, else and finally concept, but they're asking some of the tricky questions related to exception handling. So let's look at the first question on exception handling. My apologies if it's too small, if the font is too small. If you're watching on HD, you should be able to watch this. So what we have here is a class, and we're given a long question. Okay, it's pretty long question, and this was one of the feedback I got, that the questions are too long. We are having a tough time reading the entire question. Well, the trick is you should not start reading from here. So don't read from here. All right, that's the start of the code, but you should not read from here. How will Python itself start the program? It's not going to start from the class. It's actually going to start from this part, which is the try part, right? That is where it's actually going to start the code. It's not going to wait till it, this thing. One second. Yeah. So it's not going to wait till it reads the entire class and then it goes to the try and except and all. It will start exactly from the try except part. Okay. So you start also reading from there. That's a much better way. In fact, not only the try part, it's from this part. So if I have to look at it, the class definition ends over here. This was just the class definition. The first line that will be executed will be here. This mob is equal to mobile of string 15092. So this is the first string or the first statement that is going to be executed. So you should start reading from here and then go forward and see what's happening. Instead, many students are starting to read from the top, which is a mistake. You will get confused about what's happening because many of these if else may not even be executed. So you don't even need to worry about those. Okay. So I hope I've made myself clear there. So what is this the format of? This is the format of either a function or a class, and as we can see here, there's a class mobile. Therefore, we are creating a class called mobile. They're creating an object of the class mobile over here called 15092. Okay, it's not called that, sorry. The object name is mob is equal to mobile 15092. So the object name is mob and this is the class mobile and this is the value with which we want to initialize it. So this is what will get passed into the constructor or the init method. So see, if this gets passed in the init method, what we have is it goes to the init and it initializes underscore mob underscore number, which means that it's a private variable, is equal to mob number, which means here mob number of the mob object becomes 15092, right? So that's what it's become initialized to. That's all this means, and we can just stop thinking there. We don't even need to think about what this method does for now, not for now. Okay, so we go to this try block, and in the try block it says mob dot validate underscore mobile underscore number. Now you can see whether this particular method even exists. It does exist, and it exists over here. So that's where, and it has a self. It means that it is an object method. So we go to an object method mob dot validate underscore mobile underscore number, and we have to be aware of the fact that it's inside a try block. So if it's inside a try block, let's see what's actually happening. So we get mob.validate. So we go to this function. This function itself has a try block. So if this function itself has a try block, what's it going to check? It's checking its own mobile number self, right? So that is itself's mobile number, which is this string 15092. If it's not equal to 10, that means the mobile number is not equal to 10, which is the case, which is our case. It is supposed to raise an invalid length exception. Okay, it's supposed to raise an invalid length exception. Else it's supposed to do something else. So it's not going to go into the else, it's going to go into this part. It raises this invalid length exception, which means what? It will go into this except block. Except invalid length exception, print invalid length inside class, right? So this is the first statement to be printed. Print invalid length inside class. Then will this print inside class be printed? Yes, it will, because it's outside the try and except. So this except comes, so this inside the class also gets printed. So this is the second statement to be printed. And then finally the control comes back to this method. Once it's finished the method, what's it going to do? It's going to print outside the class, right? So this is the third statement to be printed. This except, that is this except over here, is never called. Why is this except never called? Because this exception, invalid length exception, is already caught over here. It need not be caught again. So this is one of those things about Python in exception handling. If the exception has already been caught, it's not going to be caught further down. Okay, so once we catch the exception, it's not going to be caught. But if it is not caught, then it will propagate till it is caught. Okay, so the correct answer for this is, and you can actually run this code in your editor and even try it out. What's actually happening here is, first it's going to first the way you should solve it is start thinking from where Python will start executing. Don't try to read the entire code. Many students, just by seeing the entire code, are getting confused. What am I supposed to do? Don't read the entire code. Start from here where it's actually executing, which is this part. Once I start from there, I see that mobile gets assigned the value 15092. It goes into the try block, goes into this validate mobile number method. So now the control is transferred from here and goes over here. It's not equal to 10. That means you have to raise the invalid length exception. Can this exception be caught within the method? Yes, it can, because there is an except method here. So it can be caught within the except method, and the exception is exactly the same exception that we want to catch, right? So that exception has been caught. and we print that invalid length inside class. Now this try except is done. We still print whatever is remaining in the method. So the first printed statement was invalid length inside class, then it was inside the class, and then it was outside the class. We never went into this except statement. Why? Because we already caught the exception, we did not catch the exception again. One final point, the exception, invalid length exception, as such there is no such exception in Python. We created that exception by inheriting from the exception class. So we inherited from the exception class and created our own exception. Hence this exception got created, class invalid length exception, exception pass. This pass just means that don't do anything, but this exception actually got created. Okay, all right. So that was the first question, that was about exception handling. Let's look at the second question, okay, which is again related to exception handling. Let's look at another question related to exception handling. Okay, so this second one again has a bunch of class, and this is just the classes. Okay, we created some exception called invalid skill exception. There is some class educator, some class classroom. Again, don't start reading from exactly what class educator does or what class classroom does. Don't start from there. Instead, start from where Python is going to start from, and Python will start from this part. So this in the code given was actually part of one thing. I've just split it up into 2 slides, but it's actually part of one whole program, and this is where Python will start. All right, so as per Python, it's going to start here. It says edu is equal to educator of Edyst, which means a new object is created, which edu is over here Edyst. That is, it has some attribute by the name of whose value is Edyst. Which attribute is that? We check over here in the init part, in which the private variable skill is assigned the skill Edyst. Okay, so here we have edu having the skill is Edyst. All right, so that's what edu has right now. Anything else happening at that point apart from that? No, because the init method just is this much. There's nothing else. So don't get confused by checking out all the other things. All right, you don't need to really check the other parts. Just check this part for now. Okay, now let's go to the next one. Classroom1.allocate educator Edyst lt11. Okay, so there are 2 strings being passed now. Let's go and check what those 2 strings are about. It says allocate rooms, which means classroom1.allocate educator. Sorry, not allocate room, allocate educator. If we look at the allocate educator, do we find any allocate educator method over here? Do we find allocate educator? Yeah, that's over here. So we find over here classroom1.allocate. Okay, sorry, I have made a mistake. Yeah, okay, sorry, I made the mistake. I went to the second line. We first went to the first. We have to go to the second line here and then go to the third line. So let me just refresh. Edu is equal to educator. We created an educator object called Edyst. So far so good. Then we created a classroom object. I missed this part. So we created a classroom object. Classroom1 is equal to classroom edu. What does a classroom edu do? Again, if you go back to the question and check, the classroom has its own init method over here. So the classroom has its own init method where it takes an educator and it assigns the classroom as none. Which is the educator? We gave the edu object over here, which is an educator object. So the edu object is the educator object is being passed over here, and classroom number is none to begin with. So what I have here is classroom1. If I take classroom1 over here, classroom 1, what do I have over here? I have Edyst as the educator. So I get nothing but the educator is over here Edyst. 1 second, let me just break that up. Yeah, so we have, okay, in this case I think if I look over here, why is it passing? Yeah, correct. So it's passing edu called educator over here. So in my bad, 1 second. Yeah, so it goes into this particular thing. Educator is Edyst, not Edyst actually. It's just educator is edu over here. Anything else is being initialized? Anything else being initialized at this point? Yes, classroom number is none. So classroom number over here is passed as none. Okay, that's done. Next, for that classroom1 object, we want to allocate the educator. Okay, and what is the educator over here? Edyst lt11. Okay, so we want to allocate the educator. If we look at the allocate educator method, this is what we have. it takes a skill required, which what did we pass in the skill required? We passed Edyst only. So we passed Edyst, and what's the classroom number that we passed? We passed LT11. So there are two things we passed here. We passed Edyst over here and LT11 over here. Now there's a try except block. If self underscore underscore educator dot validate underscore skill of skill required, which is nothing but I want my current educator, which is edu, I want edu to run validate skill. So edu's validate skill will be over here, right? This is edu's validate skill, and in that I want to pass the skill required. What is the skill required over here? We just said that this is Edyst and this is LT11. So this is Edyst, this is LT11. I want educator to validate whether Edyst and LT11, rather just Edyst, is the same, which is over here. Skill required is equal to self dot skill. We are passing Edyst. What is the skill required over here? It's also Edyst anyways. So this will return true, and it will take total allocations as plus equal to 1. So now this becomes 102, which is a class variable, and this will return true. If this returns true here, that means this condition has become true. This becomes true for the first time. It's true, and if that is true, then self classroom number is equal to classroom number, which becomes LT11. So we got LT11 over here as the classroom number for our current classroom 1. Okay, so for classroom 1 we're fine. There is no exception that has happened. There is really nothing wrong as such for this point, right? So at this point we are completely fine. No exception happened at all, and it just went ahead with it as it is. Okay, so then we have another classroom 2. So for classroom 1, what has actually happened right now? For classroom 1, we had edu and we had classroom number. Classroom number got assigned LT11. Okay, edu is still edu, that's fine. Classroom number got assigned LT11, and in the in the educator class, the number of allocations increased by 1, so it became 102. So that's what happened in the educator method, that the allocations increased by 1, it became 102. All right, too many things happening right now, no problem. We are at this point, so we've successfully executed till here. We created an edu object, we created classroom 1 object with the educator allocations have increased by 1. Okay, we are still halfway through the code. Next, what happens is classroom 2 again tries to create another classroom for edu. Okay, that means another classroom got created just like this classroom 1. That's fine. Then next, what happens? Classroom 2 dot allocate educator C# L175. Now we saw that when we assigned Edyst, it was fine because edu already had Edyst as a skill, right? But C# is not going to be equal to Edyst. So we know that in the first one we went into the true part, right? So try if this was correct, right? Now it's not going to go into the true part, right? Then what is going to happen? It will first of all try to do this. So that is, it's not going to be true. But let's see what actually happens in this validate skill method. If you go to the validate skill method over here, it's not going to be true, right? So it's going to become false. If it's false, what does it do? It raises an invalid skill exception. If it raises an invalid skill exception, this validate skill is not handling it, right? So it's not handling invalid skill, right? So invalid skill isn't being handled over here. That means it is going to be passed on to this try block here. If it's passed to this try block here, now we have a choice whether this except is going to take that or this except is going to take. This except is the invalid skill exception. So we will think it might be this or it could be this. Which except is actually going to take this particular exception, invalid skill exception, okay? And then the next thing follows. So if you make a mistake at this point, your entire answer can become wrong. Well, the answer is the first exception is taken because when a try except is being handled, the first valid exception is going to be taken, which means that you have invalid skill exception, right? This invalid skill exception, although it is here, this invalid skill exception is a child class of exception, which means that even exception, the except of exception can still be valid for this. So instead it prints something wrong, right? So it actually prints something wrong. So that is our first print statement so far, something wrong. So something wrong is our first print statement. So it prints something wrong and then it returns. Then what's it going to do? It's going to print classroom 1 dot classroom number, classroom 2 dot classroom number. Classroom 1 dot classroom number we got, which is LT11. Classroom 2 dot classroom number we never got to assign it, so it is still a none value. Finally, print educator dot total allocations. What is educator dot total allocations? In when we were doing classroom 2, we were not able to allot a classroom, which means that the classrooms did not increase, because the only way to increase the classroom is to do a +1 over here, right? That's the only way to do it. We did not, we instead raised an exception. Since we raised an exception, what happens is they do not increase more than 102, so the answer is 102. So these are the three statements that are going to print. The key thing over here was, will an exception, if there are two consecutive exceptions, both of which are valid, which exception will Python end up choosing? And the answer is Python will end up choosing the one that comes first, not the one that is more specific, but the one that comes first if both are valid. Okay, so here when we had both invalid skill exception as well as an exception, both were valid, but it went with exception. Had invalid skill exception been above, then it would have gone with invalid skill exception. So that is the difference of the try and exception part. So this was again a confusing point which many students missed. All right, let's look at the last confusing exception handling question. So let's look at the last one that was there. Okay, so this again I have derived from some of the feedback that students have given me. All right, so over here again there is some big method given over here, but remember Python is not going to start with the method. It will actually start from this part. So it will start from the main method or the executing part of the method. It's going to start from here, and then it's going to go to the example method, if at all we call the example method. Assume we don't call the example method, then it's not even going to get called. All right, okay, so what's happening here? We have a list one which has certain elements. Notice in the list we have one problem, which is that 6 is a string. So just notice that. Okay, so list 1 is this, but this is possible in Python. You can have multiple data types in the list. List 2 is equal to example of list 1 comma 4, which means that you in list 2 you're going to call example list 1 comma 4. What does this mean? We call this list 1 comma 4 method. It will go over here, right? So it will come to this part. Def example input list index. So we passed list 1 and 4. So over here list 1 is the input list, and 4 over here, right? So we have list 1 over here and we have 4 over here, right? Output list is 0 into length of input list. That means over here what is the length of the input list? Input list is 1 2 3 4 5. So there are 5 zeros going to be part of the output list, right? So there 5 zeros got created. Output list of index is equal to input list of index divided by input list of index plus 1. What is the value of index? Index is 4, which means that output list of index, so you take output list of index 0 1 2 3 4, this is the value we want to change, is equal to input list of index. Again, input list also has an index 4, so it takes 4, divided by int of input underscore list index plus 1. It's now trying to access the fifth index. Is there a fifth index? There is no fifth index. What this means is an exception will be raised. What is the exception raised when you try to get an out of bounds or try to go outside? It's called an index error. That's the exception, index error, right? Now the confusing thing is, in this try except block, there is no index error here, there is no index error here. So will it actually go into any of the errors here? No, it will not. Does that mean that it's going to execute here? Definitely not. Whenever you get an error, it will stop executing and try to go to the except block. If there is no except block, it will actually just go all the way and give you an error. But here, the situation is a bit different. I didn't get any error, but I got this finally block. What does this mean? Will this finally get executed? If that's the case, then the first thing to be printed ought to be end of function, right? So that will be the first thing to be printed actually. But is that even going to be printed finally? Then when we come back, what I notice is I do have an index error here. Will index error here be printed? And what about this finally? Will this finally get printed? So for this, for you to have clarity into how this is working, actually you should know the rules of try, except, else, finally. The rules are like this. I'll just share them with you also, but the rules are basically like this. You get the try block tries to execute, that's why it's called try. If it gets an error, it will actually try to go to the except block, right? So if the except block is able to catch it, then great. So after the except else, all of that is executed, that's fine. If in the try block there was an error that the except else did not catch or was not able to do anything, then in that case it will still throw the exception, but after completing finally. Remember that finally is always executed, right? So one thing you can be sure of, given any question, if finally is there, finally will always be executed. You can be for sure that end of function and end of program are for sure there in the question, right, in the answer. So any option that doesn't have these two things, you can just remove them, because finally, whether you get an error, you get an exception, you don't get an exception, they will always be printed, always be executed. Now in what order, we have to think about it, but they will always be executed after all of the things are done. So end of function and end of program are going to be done for sure. The only issue now is we got this index error, right? So one thing you can be sure of is if the except says value error, it's not going to be executed for index error. So this thing and this thing is not executed. The question comes, will index error be executed over here or not? Because we printed a finally, after the finally being printed, will index error still be printed? And the answer is yes, index error will be printed. So it will print invalid index over here, right? And this is the correct answer. Now let me explain why. What happens is, in a try block, it will try to get any exceptions. If it gets the exceptions, it will try to catch over here as per the except blocks. We did not get any exception over there. So what it's going to do is, it's going to execute the finally. It will execute the finally over here, which is end of function, and it will still the unresolved exception or the unresolved error gets thrown back above. So let's say if there was the main method, if this happened in the main method, you would as a user actually see this problem. But because this is a method being called, it goes back to wherever the method was called. The method was called here in this try block. So this part will throw the index error. Now luckily our code over here has the index error catching, so it will not throw it further. It will catch the index error, and as I said, finally will always get executed. So just a couple of rules, you can find this online also, but the couple of rules: if the exception occurs during the execution of try clause, then it might be handled by the except clause. If the exception is not handled by except clause, exception is re-raised after the final clause has been executed, which is exactly what happened right now. That is, we will finish everything, we'll do finally, and we'll re-raise the exception back to wherever it was called from. Some other rules which could come for your next exams is the exception could again occur. So let's say you have an exception and you go to an except or an else clause. Again, within those except and else clause, we could still have an exception. It is still re-raised after the finally clause has been executed. Okay. If the try statement reaches a break, continue or return statement. Again, this is important. First, the finally clause will execute, and then the finally clause will execute, and then the return or the break or whatever will be executed. So finally, no matter what, finally has to always be executed. All right. So this is another rule. Now this is again a question that most people get wrong. If a finally clause includes a return statement, the return value will be the one from the finally clause's return statement, not the value from the try clause's return statement. Which means that if your try clause had a return and your finally had a return, your finally will be the one whose return statement will be counted and not your try clause's return. Okay. So this is like some of the exception handling doubts that most students had, and that's what I just covered. I'm going to take a quick look at the chat. What are the kind of questions that you have had upon exception handling? Would you have any doubts? And if you do, I'll take them up. Otherwise, I will go to the next topics of data structures and everything. Okay. So some of the questions is okay. Most of you are asking what really happens if we see this kind of a question. It's going to take a lot of time. How do we actually go so how do we actually go ahead and actually start doing these questions? Basically, which means that the questions I shared, I myself took about, it's been half an hour and I've just done 3 questions. And if I get such a big question, how am I actually going to solve these questions? Well, the answer is don't guess. First of all, please don't guess for any of these questions, because these questions have negative marking. So don't guess. I picked up the big questions because those are the ones you had doubt. I saw some of the feedback from the students, and there were questions that were small in nature. For example, there was a hashing question which was exactly like the one I discussed in the previous webinar. The link is there below, so it's in the previous webinar, you can just check that. There was a question exactly like that. There were questions exactly on theory, which I'll share 1 or 2 questions right now which were there. You can just solve them as it is. Those are the ones you should go for. See the smaller questions. So just you can scroll through all the questions and see which are the ones. Try to answer those ones first. Then try to go for those questions in which you think these are some concepts I know. Like if you are good at data structures, try to attempt the data structures questions. If you're good at exception handling, go for the exception handling question. And again, just because a code is like 20 lines or 30 lines doesn't mean that you have to read the entire code. Okay, it means that start from where Python starts reading and then keep going to that particular place where it's happening. Don't read from the start. Read from where Python is starting. Okay, so I hope that answers your question. Somebody is asking, is exceptions important? Exception is absolutely important. I saw minimum 3 questions as per what students had told me, that there are about 3 questions that have come on exception handling. It could be more in your case. Exception handling, definitely there are a lot of MCQs they can ask. See, things like recursion and all, which are difficult to code, it's difficult to ask MCQs on that. But exception handling, OOP, definitely a lot of MCQs can be asked on that. So do check out some questions based on on exception handling. All right. Okay. I'll go to the next topic, which was data structures. 1 or 2 things about data structures. One is, please know the uses of each data structure. For example, there was a question given that there is, let's say somebody is stuck in a mall or something. So somebody entered a very big mall. Okay. And the mall has like multi floors. There are many floors, and the person is lost. Okay. So there's a mall, and the person is lost. They don't know where to go. And there is one particular entry. Let's say this is the entry. All right. There's one particular exit over here, but the person doesn't know how to reach that entry or exit. All that person knows is how to get to a particular popcorn stand. Okay. So there is a popcorn stand over here. All right. The person knows how to get there, but doesn't know how to get to entry and exit. But the person knows that if they reach popcorn stand, there are multiple ways to reach the entry and multiple ways to reach the exit. So you don't have to figure out how to reach. I mean, you all have gone to the mall. What I'm saying is, the question was, if this person knows how to get to the popcorn stand, and from the popcorn stand there are multiple ways of reaching this exit, and there are multiple ways of reaching this entry, how can what is the best data structure to represent this particular ways? Which basically means I have one point, I can get multiple locations to another point, and from this point I can probably get another multiple locations to another point, right? Or I have multiple points, let's say this goes another place, this goes another place. What is the best data structure used to represent such nodes? Well, the answer is you should use a graph over here. All right. Now, it's not just about this answer. I think the options were graph, linked list, trees, queues, sets, and all of that. Each data structure has its own uses, and you should remember what those uses are. So, for example, a linked list is really good if you just want to know what is in front of you and what is it behind you. Okay. A stack is really good if you want to know what's the least recent value, what is the most recent value, you want to know that. A queue is really useful if you want to, plan a line or a queue that if everybody is standing in front of each other. So understand why each data structure is used. Don't just blindly read about data structures. Just understand how each data structure is used. Okay, so that's the other thing. Okay, so now I'm going to go again into the MCQs of data structures, but these kind of small theory questions were there. So if you can quickly scroll by and see 1 or 2 questions that are exactly like this, then you should attempt those first and then come back to the more difficult questions. Okay, now let me look at some data structures questions. Okay, there was a data structure question related to queues. I hope everybody can see this. Okay, if not, let me just 1 second. Yeah. Alright, so I hope everybody can see this particular thing. Okay, so I'm at this data structure. This is completely a queue based question. Okay, and in this question multiple things are happening. The question given is, what would be the values of output queue from front to rear when the below input queue is passed to the given function? So we have this queue and some things are happening to it. We have to tell what the output queue value will be. So the first thing to do is to actually take a pen and paper. Now some people are asking whether we can take pen and paper or not. I believe you can take pen and paper as long as you're just writing down, you're not reading too much from it. I believe so, but again, I think check with your placement officers and see whether that's possible, because Infosys has had briefings with them and they would know better. But I suggest take a pen and paper over here, and it is 376-25632. 376-256-352, right? So that's what is there, 376-256-32. Okay, this is from front to rear. So this is my front and this is my rear, and as you know, we always insert from the rear and delete from the front. Okay, if you're not sure, just whenever you're confused, just remember the line to a movie ticket or to a restaurant. Who is the first person to be removed? The person who's at the front of the queue. They take the ticket and they get out of the queue. When do you enter into the queue? You enter from the back side of the queue, that is the rear of the queue. If you try to enter from the front of the queue, you will get beaten up. So you actually enter in the rear of the queue. Now this is the queue that is given to you. You are supposed to run this particular code and tell what's actually happening. So what happens here is, one second, I think the code got messed up a little bit. One second. Yeah, but this is part of the else. Okay, so that output underscore queue is part of the else. All right, so here we defined a queue of size 10. So even though in Python you don't need to do this, but they defined a queue of size 10. This is the output queue. All right, and initially both the front and rear have nothing to do in the output queue, while not input queue is empty, which is not another way of saying that while the input queue is full, or sorry, is not empty, that is, there is no emptiness in the input queue. That means there is some elements in the input queue. Keep doing whatever you're doing. What is it that you're doing? Var is equal to input queue dot dequeue. So we first dequeue this. So we first dequeue an element from here. We get 3. So currently var is equal to 3. And this element has been dequeued. Remember that. Most students are forgetting to do that. It's dequeued. That means now the front is equal to 7. If var less than equal to 5. Is var less than equal to 5? Yes, it is. So in the output queue, I'm supposed to enqueue. What should I enqueue? Input queue dot dequeue. This is 7 plus 1. I should dequeue 8 currently, right? So I'm supposed to enqueue in the output queue 7 plus 1. 8 is what I'm supposed to enqueue. Okay. Else we don't do anything of that. So now we go to the next again. Okay. So input queue dot dequeue plus 1 7 plus 1 8 has been dequeued, and if 7 has been dequeued, then your front is now at 6. Okay, so we had 3 7. First var became 3, then again we dequeued plus 1 7 plus 1 8 is what we enqueued. Okay, next we dequeue again, var is equal to dequeue. So now var becomes 6. If var becomes 6, it will not satisfy the first condition, but this got dequeued. Your front is at 2. It will not satisfy the first condition. Go to the second condition. What is the second condition? Second condition says output queue dot enqueue. So in output queue, you're supposed to enqueue something. First dequeue that value and again dequeue the value in the input queue. So dequeue this 8 value, dequeue the 2 value, add them, it becomes 10, and then enter that into the output queue. So this is your output queue, this is your input queue. So I entered that over here. I got 10 in my input queue, and now my front is pointing to 5 in my input queue. Okay, all right. Next, what do? Var is equal to input queue dot dequeue. That means 5 is 5 less than equal to 5. Yes, it is. So 5 is less than equal to 5. That means we will go into this statement. So this, it's over here. Output queue dot enqueue this. So we're supposed to enqueue 7 because 6 plus 1 is 7, and now my currently front is over here, right? Else, yeah. So we don't go into the else. Okay. Then what happens? Again, is it empty? It's not empty. So we do output queue, input queue dot dequeue. So we input, what did we do? We dequeued here. So var is 3. So var again becomes 3 over here. If var is 3, var less than equal to 5. Yes, var is less than equal to 5, which means output queue dot enqueue 3, right? We are supposed to enqueue 2 plus 1, which is 3. So we'll input 3, else nothing. And again, while is not empty, now it has become empty. So now we return this queue, which is nothing but 10 7 3. Okay, so the answer becomes 10 7 3, which is the option over here, B, right? 10 7 3, that's what the option comes over here. There were many options, but 10 7 3 is the option. So yeah, just do a couple of these rounds and you will get it. If you have ever implemented stacks or queues yourself by your own classes, then this will not be difficult. If you've always used the inbuilt methods of Python, then it will become difficult. But if you've not used if you've done it yourself using classes, then this will not be too difficult what I said. So I hope you understood that one. Let's look at another data structures type of question. Okay, in this one again we're given some big methods, stack, compute, and stack to we're given something. So again, as I said, don't even try with this one. First get what is the input, what's actually happening. So we are given this input. The input is 14, 35, 22, 10, 5, 20. This is the stack. Remember, in stack there are two methods, push and pop. If this is the top right now, that means whatever we insert is going to be pushed at the top of the stack, and whatever is popped is going to also be popped from the top of the stack. So what will be the content of stack 2 from top to bottom after the execution of above function when stack is passed as input parameter? That is, we are passing this 14, 35, 22, 10, 5, 20 into that function. So let's take that stack, which is 14, 35, 22, 10, 5, 20. Let me just write it here. 14, 35, 22, 10, 5, 20, right? So just confirming that we have 14, 35, 22, 10, 5, 20. Okay. Now let's see what actually happens. Stack 2 is equal to stack of 5. So we created stack 2, which is another value. So let's say stack 2 is this. We have stack 2 over here. All right. 1 minute. What I'll do is, right, I'll just move these down because in a stack we actually keep increasing values. So we don't want to remove from the top. So I'll just remove this part because we'll keep adding values into the stack. So we're going to keep adding on top, right? Okay. So while stack 1 is empty, is not empty. So stack 1 is definitely not empty. This is our stack 1, stack 1, right? So while stack 1 is definitely, it's not empty. If stack 1 dot pop, so automatically we already popped over here, mod 5 equal to 0. Is stack 1 dot pop mod 5 equal to 0? No, but this got popped out. Okay. Else, if stack 1 is not empty, it's not empty, stack 2 dot push stack 1 dot pop into 2. What did we pop from stack 1? Now when we pop from stack 1, we get 70. So stack 1 into pop, stack 1 dot pop into 2, that is 35 into 2, which is 70. So 70 got pushed into our stack 2. So let's say this is stack 2, 70 got pushed into the stack 2. Okay. After that, if stack 2 is empty, it's not empty. Else stack 2 dot push 10. So again in stack 2 we are going to push 10 over here. Okay. So far in our stack 2 we have 70, we have 10, and in our stack 1 we have 22, 10, 5, 20. Okay. Again it goes up while stack 1 is not empty, it's not empty. Stack 1 dot pop, so here it popped this modulo phi equal to 0, it's not, so it doesn't break. If stack 1 is not empty, which it's not empty, stack 2 dot push stack 1 dot pop into 2, which is stack 1 dot pop is 10 into 2 is 20, so we pushed this. If stack 2 is empty, stack 2 is not empty, else stack 2 dot push 10, so again we push 10 over here into stack 2. So now we have 10, 20, 10, 70 from top to bottom. Okay. Now again we go here, while stack 1 is not empty, it's not empty. If stack 1 dot pop mod phi equal to 0, yes, now this is 0, so it breaks. If it breaks here, means it's actually going to break out of the while loop and return the stack 2. If it returns the stack 2, what are we going to get? 10, 20, 10, 70. So the answer has to be 10, 20, 10, 70, which is answer A. 10, 20, 10, 70. This is the particular answer. Okay. From top to bottom, right? So that's what it means, from top to bottom, 10, 20, 10, 70. Okay. The other thing that they've made it extremely difficult is, if these are the options, if you first got 70 as the method, as the answer, you can eliminate only one option. Then you got 10 as the second option, then you can eliminate none of the options. Then when you got 20, you can still eliminate only one more option. So you have to find out the entire thing. So sometimes elimination does not work. In any case, if you did the entire method, you would get 10, 20, 10, 70. Okay. So these are two data structures questions that I found were useful, that were important and that were useful to you. There were more like these. We have updated more like these on the Edyst platform. All of those students who are already Edyst students will be uploading these sample questions to you right after the webinar. For those of you who want to get access to these kind of questions, I'll just show you how you can get access to it as well. And then I'll move on to some of the OOP questions. Okay. So if you go to Edyst underscore CCP, so I'll just show you how to exactly get there. Just give me 1 minute. Okay. Right, so if you go to this particular link, one second. Right, so if you yourself want access to this, you have to just go to this link, which is bit.ly/edyst_ccp. This is particularly designed for all students who want to prepare for placements, not only for InfyTQ, because InfyTQ will just come and go, but it's for all of the upcoming codes, the placement drives. So if you are not an Edyst student, you've not yet signed up on the Edyst platform, you can go up to this bit.ly/edyst_ccp. This is the page that will show up to you. One second. Yeah. This is the page that will show up for you. You can just go through all of the companies that we are showing. This is the cost of the course, and this you can see all of the companies that we are preparing for. InfyTQ is just one of them. As you prepare for your upcoming placement rounds, this will be really useful. You can click try one free module, sign in with your preferred operator, whichever that is, and once you sign in, let's say I sign in with Google right now. Once you sign in, this is the particular page that will show up for you. One second, I'll show you which one will come. This page is the one that will come up for you. Obviously, some of it will be blocked because if you're not a paid customer, you don't get all of it. But you can see this InfyTQ preparation. In this, we are constantly uploading all of the MCQs like these. So, we will be uploading the questions I discussed today in the MCQs also. So you'll get a chance of practicing that as well. So if you want access to all of these, just sign up at bit.ly/edyst_ccp. That's bit.ly/edyst_ccp, and go ahead and start the practice also for the InfyTQ questions. All right. The last topic I want to cover, and I promise this is only going to be like a 10-minute thing, is OOP. So in OOP, generally speaking, I saw that most of the questions were covered, in the sense that if you're an Edyst student, you've already seen many of the things, including things like MRO. If you want to know what MRO is and inheritance is, so there were init, MRO, and inheritance. I covered in deep. That is, I covered comprehensively and deeply in the previous webinar. So please check the previous webinar. That is the previous. You can check the previous webinar below in the link, in the description link. You can go ahead and check that, and you will get the link for that. So init, MRO, inheritance, all of these concepts are covered there, including hashing. Hashing also, I saw some questions. A question exactly like the one that was there in the previous webinar was there for hashing. So please go ahead and check the previous webinar also. The link is directly below in the description. All right. Now, one thing of OOP that has not been covered in Python, we cover this in Java. There's something called abstract classes. An abstract class is one whose, let's say you have a class A, all right. So you have a class A, all right, and let's say that is abstract. Okay. If you have a class B inheriting from class A, there are 2-3 rules that you're supposed to follow. Number one, if class A is abstract, you can never instantiate it. Okay. So you can never instantiate, which means you can never actually create an object of class A. That's not allowed. It's class A is there purely for inheritance because it's an abstract class. Okay. So if you want to create an abstract class in Python, how do you do it? You have to actually import the ABC module as well as the abstract method module. Okay, so go ahead and read up about these things. It's a simple one-page reader. So just go ahead and read about that. So excuse me, you will need the ABC and abstract method modules. So read about these two things. Okay, that's one. The second thing that you need to know is class B can inherit from class A, but class B must implement all of the abstract methods. So it has to implement all abstract methods of A, right? So even if one abstract method of A is left out, then it will be an error. It has to implement all the abstract methods of A if B is inheriting from A, because A is an abstract class. So you usually do abstract classes. What's the use of abstract class is you have so many child classes and each has a specific implementation of its own of the method. The only thing you want to make sure is all of the classes have the implementation. It's like imagine a bank, and this will come in your technical interview, so I'll just give you an example. Imagine a bank. The bank is RBI, and each bank requires the RBI requires each of its child banks to implement the ATM method, right? How to dispense cash. Now, how every ATM dispenses cash is different for different banks, but RBI makes it mandatory that each class has to, or each bank has to implement the ATM method. So in this case, you will implement your RBI as a abstract class, and all of the classes that inherit from RBI must definitely implement those abstract methods. So this way, what the parent class is ensuring is that anybody who wants to inherit from me has to forever implement the abstract methods. So that is what's happening in the abstract methods and abstract classes concept. Okay, now so this is not just it. There are some other other things also about abstract classes. One of those things is, while each abstract method has to, each child class has to implement the abstract method, can the abstract class itself have a default implementation? So for example, you have a class A, and can RBI itself has its own default implementation of ATM? Yes, it can. A class A, which is an abstract method, can have a default implementation. Now you might be saying, why will it want an implementation if there is no object of that class? Well, even though there is no object of class A, it can be that class B or C or D can just call the super method and implement that class's method. So instead of relying on its own implementation, it can use super to rely on the parent class's implementation. So these are the 2-3 exceptions regarding abstract classes which were asked. So do read up on these things, and you'll get all of the, because in abstract methods there are only like 2-3 questions. If you want to get the exact question that was asked, it's on the Edyst platform, so you'll get that exact type of question asked. Sorry, so you'll get that. Now the use cases for OOP are also very important. So for example, a question was given that there's a manager, and that manager has many team members, right? So there's a manager over here, right, and has many team members, right? The manager has certain things. So for example, the manager has an ID card, and all of the team members also have an ID card. Now, is the manager has an ID card, but the manager supervises these people. They all have an ID card, and they also have some common functionality, but the manager has some extra functionalities. In this case, what exactly should we do? What is the best way to morph this relation? And the answer is, this is a very good concept for inheritance, that in inheritance you can actually morph this relation very well. So this is again another type of theoretical OOP question where a scenario is given and you are supposed to tell what is the best type of OOP concept to use in this case. In this case, it would be inheritance. Lastly, one important question concept that also came was called variable arguments. So in Python, you can actually give variable arguments, which means that, for example, you have a function called mysum. These are all possible ways of declaring the mysum function. In this particular case, you are accepting only one particular argument. So you have def mysum my integers, which is one argument. That's it. It's just one argument. This argument could be an int, could be a list, could be a dictionary, whatever it is, but it is just one argument over here. We can't have more than one argument. So in the star integers means that you're passing a tuple of arguments, right? So there can be multiple arguments. Each of them could be multiple lists or integers, whatever, but this is a tuple that is being passed. And star means that we are passing a dictionary over here. That's what the star means, right? Read about these things, read about the order, because again, a question was asked on whether a standard argument will come first or the multiple arguments will come first. So read about these concepts, fairly standard concepts. If you've done Python, then these will be fairly standard for you. So yeah, this is just what I wanted to cover for all of you. Do read about these particular concepts, and for exact practice questions, you'll get them on the Edyst platform also, right? So with that, that's mainly it for this particular session. We covered, what all did we cover right now? We covered this thing, exception handling, data structures, OOP, and we actually also covered variable arguments, right? So what we actually covered was all of these topics. Again, just recapping, for exception handling, there are multiple cases. Please go ahead and rewind to the part where I was talking about exception handling and read up about the different cases of exception handling. There were at least 3-4 questions on this, so make sure you are well versed with exception handling. For data structures, there were 3-4 questions on stacks, queues, linked lists, and you have to manually do these questions. So make sure you know how each linked list, stacks, queues works. Make sure you have a pen and paper when you do this. Also make sure you know for which use case you are going to use which data structure. So a tree is used, like for example a family tree, or when you have like hierarchy, if you just want to plan roots or you want to plan friends on Facebook, these are all good use cases for graph data structure. OOP, there were mainly like abstract classes, static methods. Those are the kind of questions. So most of it we have already done. If you want to know more about OOP, things like init, new method, MRO, all of that is mentioned in the previous webinar. You can just click on the link below, and there is the previous webinar. We've discussed all of the things on OOP. Similarly with hashing, a question ditto as to what we discussed in the previous hashing webinar, has come. So please go ahead and check out the hashing questions also. And variable arguments is something you guys can cover, so please go ahead and check out variable arguments as well. So these are some important tips from my side. I will be waiting from you who are all our students. I will be waiting for you and for other students to get back to us and give us more feedback on what are the kind of questions. I've got a lot of popular demand for SQL and MongoDB and those things, so we'll try to cover that in an upcoming webinar if possible, some of the questions on SQL. Having said that, in the previous webinar, the questions and the doubts that we had covered on SQL are exactly like those are the kind of questions that have come in the in the InfyTQ. So if you want to know about SQL also, you can just go to the previous webinar. I covered, I think, almost 60 minutes of joins and the kind of questions that can be asked, right? So right now we'll just go to some questions, and again, before I go to questions, a sincere request to like this video so that more students come to know about it, and subscribe to this channel so that more you will get a notification when we do the next webinar like this, right? All right, so any specific questions? Let me just check it out. Any specific questions right now? Can you explain, can you conduct a webinar tomorrow? We may not conduct a webinar tomorrow. We are just going to wait for the next set of questions, feedback to come from our students, which are the kind of questions that they're having doubts in. In case you are having doubts in specific questions, you can always email us at team@edyst.com or just WhatsApp us. Our WhatsApp number is there on the on our website, so you can just go and email us. Right. All right, so some students are asking about linked list. We have some linked list MCQs on the Edyst platform. Please go and check it. I purposely didn't cover linked list because I found that the stacks and queues questions were more difficult than the linked list questions. The way I solved the stacks and queues questions is exactly how you're supposed to solve the linked list questions also, right? Let me explain about text files. Okay, so text files is just a little bit about reading and writing on files. You can just read about that. I'll probably upload some of the content of that on the Edyst platform so that you can get that as well. All right. Can we give the test on a laptop with a webcam? Yes, Monish, you can give the test with a laptop on a webcam. Many of our students have already given that. The laptop and the laptop's webcam is working, but I highly suggest that you first do some practice. That is, probably do a video call with someone, see if your laptop webcam is working, give the sample test probably, so all of those things will help you. Okay. Okay. All right, so somebody's asking specifically about the linked list question. That linked list question is very similar to the stacks queues questions I just did. So just go on to the Edyst platform. We have that question exactly that you're talking about. Many other questions also many other students also reported that question. So we have that question on the platform. So you can just go ahead and check there. Is use of rough sheet valid during the test? I believe it is. It is very much valid. The use of rough sheets is definitely valid. It's just don't try to act like you're copying directly from somewhere, because Edyst also does proctored tests, and when we see the proctored videos, if you're copying from somewhere, it's very obvious. If you're just using a rough sheet to just do some calculation, it's always fine. So as long as you're just doing that, it's okay, but don't be like too obvious about looking anywhere and things like that. Vaibhav is saying you're doing great work. Oh, thanks Vaibhav. Thank you so much for reading for watching our webinars. Please share with your friends, Vaibhav, and I hope more of such rural students can get benefited. All right, so those were mainly the questions. If you have more questions, please okay, Vamsi Krishna is asking about hash tables. Vamsi Krishna, if you want to know more about hash tables, just watch the previous webinar. Link is in the description below. It's a very simple concept. Don't think too much about it. In the last 10 minutes of the previous webinar, I've covered about hash tables. So go and read up about hash tables. Table scan and index scan. Shell, DBMS questions we are not covering right now. We have to go in a lot of detail, but we will try to do a webinar as soon as possible on the DBMS questions and cover those. Sorry if it's a little late for your slot, but we will try to cover the DBMS questions in the upcoming webinars as well. All right. please conduct a webinar on Java. Monish, we have most of our students are currently on Python and we are focusing more on Python. So we will not be covering exactly on Java. Having said that, if you have the previous, if you have some of the example questions on Java, and if you can send us to us at team@edyst.com, we will try to do a webinar on that. There's no guarantee. But please let us go through the questions at least once and then we can go. Majority of our students are on Python and hence we are continuing on Python, right? Which section should we attempt first? That's what Durga Prasad is asking. So I'm not sure whether you can choose aptitude or SQL or Python, whichever. If you can choose, then choose the one you're strongest in. You'll have more confidence in. So if that's the case, then you will be able to do that. If you can choose the section, choose the one that you're the most strongest in. All right. Okay. So sir, please cover all questions which asked in 19th Feb. We covered most of the questions most of the questions were similar to the ones I did. I don't have all the questions, nor is that proper to do. I am just answering the questions that our students have shared with us, and so we went through all the questions that we had. For more questions, it's on the Edyst platform. Vishal is asking, what exactly is Vishal asking? I'm not getting. Okay, all right. So Vishal is not serious over here. All right, cool, Vishal. Need a webinar on DBMS before tomorrow's slot. Sajid, for all SQL questions, we've already covered SQL questions. So please just check the previous webinar and you'll get that. So if you just check the previous webinar, we've covered all SQL based questions. Very specific to DBMS, I saw that there weren't that many. Most students said that there's only one or two. So you can just probably ignore those, or just learn some of the basic of DML, DDL and all of that. When it comes to SQL questions, we did a very specific, very detailed webinar last time. The link is there below. So if you are stuck in joins and queries and all of that, you can refer to the previous webinar itself. Okay. Monish is asking, what is the cutoff for screening test? Actually, this time we originally thought that it could be 65%, but this time, as per our information, we are not really sure what the cutoff is. So it could just be more than that. It could be less than that, depending on the turnout of the students and how well the students have done. So we can't be really sure. Okay, about REPR and STR methods. Yash, can you just come online to the Edyst platform and chat with our mentors? Our mentors will help you with that. That will be helpful for you. Okay. Please conduct one more seminar before 23rd. We will try our best to cover one more. I think we've covered most questions, but we'll try our best. In Python, which topic should we focus more? Okay, so if you have only about 2 days to prepare, the two topics you should focus on is OOP and exception handling, because there are limited number of questions. If you understand the concept of these two, then at least 6 to 7 questions you will be able to solve. So OOP and exception handling, try to focus more on these two topics. Data structures if you can, but data structures is a difficult topic. Okay. Can we use calculators during exams? I don't think you can use our calculators, but again, please check the InfyTQ paper, the InfyTQ instructions. That is the best place to check all of these information. Okay, expected cutoff, expected screening. I just answered this question. I'm not really sure. It just depends on the turnout for that year. All right. Okay, there was a lot of questions. I didn't expect that many. Thank you so much, everybody, for asking those questions. Okay, please conduct a webinar on time complexities of the sorting techniques. We've actually covered time complexity and order notation in the Edyst course. So if you've done our Python course, we've covered that. It's a difficult topic to explain right from scratch, nor is it really being asked that much. There is maximum 1 question out of 20 being asked on that. So, you can just read up on that from elsewhere. I would suggest not to go too deep into that. Just read up a little bit on that. What is the order notation of the 3 famous sort: bubble, selection and insertion? And then what is the order and space notation for merge and quick sort? Just read about those. That should be enough, I'm guessing. All right. Can we take pen and paper? I believe you can take pen and paper. Okay. Saurav is asking, sir, I am not prepared for DBMS. Can you suggest me something in the short time span? So for DBMS, see, DBMS specifically, if you're trying to prepare for things like DML and all, don't start preparing for that. Minimum number of questions have come from that. Maximum of questions have come from SQL, group by, joins, and those we have covered in the previous webinar. So watch our previous webinar to understand SQL and joins. At least you'll be able to solve those level of questions. So if you just have little time in DBMS, just go and watch our previous webinar on SQL. Okay. About normalization in DBMS, we'll cover all of this in the upcoming webinars. All right. Okay, so I think we'll be covering most of these questions about DBMS in the upcoming webinars. Somebody is asking for data structures. Um, data structures is a more deep topic. We have covered it in depth in our Python course. So we have covered exactly in depth not only those data structures but in-depth data structures. We can't really cover that in one webinar. It has to be multiple classes, and that's already there on the Python course. I think all Edyst students already have access to that. So if you are an Edyst student on our Python course, you can directly understand the data structures and advanced data structures modules. Are the data structures questions asked in Java part? Yes, every subject that is there in Python is almost there in Java. In fact, I think, for example, abstract classes are not even in the default Python, but because they're in Java, they were asked in Python also. So whatever I've discussed today in terms of Python is also kind of asked in Java as well. Okay. Okay, I am poor in class methods. Please tell me a suggestion, Venkat. Venkat, only way to do is learn more about OOP. Again, if you're on Edyst Python course, you will already have access to OOP, where we explain this thing in a fun and detailed manner. So you can go ahead and sign up for the Python course on Edyst. But again, these are topics that will not come suddenly in a 1 day or 2 day batting. You have to actually keep learning a lot of Python. So if you're a 3-2 student who's not yet very confident in programming, don't think that any last minute preparation is going to help you suddenly. If you already know programming, then it'll be good. But if you are suddenly thinking that I'll learn programming in 2 days, it's not going to work out. Please invest in yourself, invest some time, invest in your career, and actually learn programming properly. And sign up for any course. We have courses, but really sign up for any course and learn programming before you are 4-1. Otherwise, when it comes to 4-1, it will be too late to start learning. All right. What topics are best to start out in SQL? The best topics to start out are, first do the select query, select filters, all of that. So select star from, select, all of that. And then the where clause, and then all of the Boolean operators. So that is the minimum you should definitely know. Then group by and joins. Those are the next two main topics that you should know in SQL. All right. Okay, other people, thank you for your webinars. Thank you everybody for watching. Because you watch, we are very encouraged to do the webinars. So I'm really happy that you're all enjoying. Please, the only request we have is do share with your friends and do like this video so that other people come to know about this video as well. Okay. Okay, which topic I should prepare for in data structures? I have 4 days only. Stacks, queues, linked lists. These are the 3 topics you should prepare for in data structures if you have only 3 days. Stacks, queues, and linked lists. Okay. There was a question on reference variables. Can you tell about that? Okay, Yash, this is a good question. It's a small question. So I'll just take about 2 minutes and explain this question. Yeah, I actually wanted to explain it. So thanks for bringing it up. Okay, so the question is mainly about reference variables, and this is how reference variables work. Okay, most people don't understand reference variables. So like, for example, there was a question, I think, on teams, or it was about so let's say example, you have a class called cake. Okay. You create, so this is a class. So let's say you have a class, cake, all right. You create an object called, let's say, chocolate cake, okay, is equal to, cake. So that is, what happens here is a cake object is created. So there is a cake object to which this chocolate cake is referring to. Then you create probably a strawberry cake, all right. So it's a strawberry cake is equal to cake is what you create, okay. So now there's another object to which a strawberry cake is referring to. Then what you do is you do something like, there's a third cake, let's say you call it a mango cake, okay. But a mango cake is equal to the chocolate cake, all right. In this case, a new cake is not formed. Instead, or new object is not formed. The mango and the chocolate both point to the previous object, okay. This is both in Python and in Java, by the way. So it's the same concept. So both chocolate and mango are pointing to the same cake, right? Now, in case you do something like mango is equal to cake and chocolate is equal to cake, what happens is, at this point, mango is equal to cake, you get a new cake and mango points to that. And when chocolate is equal to cake, you get again a new cake and chocolate is pointing to that. And the original object, so this is the original object, no references are left for the original object. So I think the question was, how many references are there for the original object. In this particular case, there are 0 references for the original object because they all moved on. Basically, whenever you have a syntax like this, it means a new object is created, and every time a new object is created, on the left side is what is referring to it. So here new object got created, mango is now pointing to that new object. It no longer points to the previous object. Then chalk is equal to cake. Then now the chocolate points to a new cake object. It doesn't point to the previous cake object. All right. So that was the question. I hope you understood that part. All right. Like it's a very standard question. Any OOP based question will definitely have that, both in Python and Java. This is the same concept in Python and Java. Okay, we are really over time right now, but I'm really happy with everybody who's asked questions. Please keep asking such questions, and please ask questions when not just one day before the InfyTQ. I see a lot of engineering students just start preparing 2 days or 1 day before the exam. If you prepare at least 1 month or 2 months in advance, you'll definitely crack all of these exams because they are not really that difficult. You just have to start preparing in advance. So that's it from our side. Thank you everybody for joining. Again, subscribe to this channel if you want to know when we're doing our next webinar. Like this video so that other people get to know about it as well. Share in your college groups. Maybe they also benefit for InfyTQ, and all of you can get placed together in Infosys together. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll be with you soon, hopefully with another webinar regarding previous InfyTQ questions. Thank you so much, and see you all next time. All the best to you for your upcoming Infosys drives.